Welcome to the True and Constant podcast presented by Gamma Phi Beta Sorority in celebration of 150 years of sisterhood. Each month, incredible alumni of our sisterhood join us to celebrate their stories, experiences, and pearls of wisdom in Gamma Phi Beta and beyond. We are your hosts, Emma Oremus of Gamma Tau Chapter and Lex Stewart of Eta Omicron Chapter.
Today, we are joined by our Gamma Phi Beta sister from Oklahoma City University Beta Omicron Chapter, Kelli O'Hara. Kelli O'Hara is a singer and actress who's worked in Broadway and opera productions. She won the 2015 Tony Award for the Best Actress in a Musical for her role of Anna in The King and I. She's also been nominated for her work in The Light in the Piazza, South Pacific, and Kiss Me Kate, just to name a few. She's also appeared in television and film roles. You can spot her in works like Masters of Sex, 13 Reasons Why, and The Gilded Age. Please join us in welcoming Kelli to the show. Welcome,
Yay.
Kelli. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Welcome. Well, I would be remiss to not mention how much I've loved seeing you in different works over the years. Just the other day, I was watching Sex and the City 2, and there you were gracing the screens. And 2015 Emma would also hate to not mention that I loved Peter Pan Live. And I think you as Mrs. Darling is so cute. I have seen that musical like 20,000 times. I love it.
Thank you. Yeah, those were both really fun, last minute fun things that you mentioned. And also, those are the two things you mentioned that came right after I had both of my children. And so my memory, during Sex and the City, he was less than 2 months old. And I remember having to be away from home to shoot that and being upset for a couple of days. And then Peter Pan Live happened right when my daughter was a baby. And so that's funny you mentioned those because they both have sort of that memory for me.
Yes. Yeah. Those are special ones for sure.
Thank you.
That is terrific. Well, we've highlighted a couple of your different productions, the different works that you've participated in already, Kelli. You've achieved some incredible success in what many would call a highly competitive field. I'm curious, was there a moment that you realized that you wanted to go into the performing arts? When did your connection to the performing arts start? Were you always a theater kid, or did it come later in life?
Well, I think I probably was. I mean, sometimes I think who knows if you believe in reincarnation or something. I don't know, because
Sure.
What I do know is that I was born and raised in a town out in Western Oklahoma where very little of this was ever happening. But for some reason, movie musicals were so a part of my childhood. I didn't have a lot of live theater to go to. And then when I was about 5, there was a woman that had become Miss America that was from my small town.
Oh, wow.
And she came back to visit, and the auditorium where I did all of my band and everything in that little town was called the Susan Powell Fine Arts Auditorium. And so she came back to town and she sang, and I was 5, and my mom tells me this story. And I remember saying, I want to sing like her. And then I found out that she went to Oklahoma City University and studied voice with Florence Birdwell, who I called the Bird Lady at that time. And so cut to a few years later when I'm going to college and I say, I only have one place I'm going. I'm going to Oklahoma City University and I'm going to take lessons from the Bird Lady. And that's just what I did. So it was sort of like written in the stars or something.
Yeah. Planted the seed really early at 5, sort of that dream forward. That's beautiful.
So, I mean, not to give a spoiler, but it sounds like you went on that way. You went to Oklahoma City University and you studied with Florence Birdwell. How did that process go about? What was it like working with her?
Well, I couldn't have known that it was exactly what I was supposed to be doing. I mean, she really changed my life. But so many things had to work out for that to happen. My dad actually both my parents went back to school after they had kids and gotten their masters. And when my dad was in his 40s, he went back to law school, which had been his dream because he was farming out in Western Oklahoma where he grew up. And so I was in high school and they came to me and they basically said, we're moving. I was going to be a junior in high school. And I said, oh, no, we're not. I'm not going. And they said, yes, we are. And you're going to finish high school in Oklahoma City. But guess what? One of my law partners is married to a woman who used to take lessons from Florence Birdwell, and she can teach you voice lessons. So I agreed to it. And then when my senior year came, I was able to get an audition at OCU and meet Mrs. Birdwell, She really changed my life. She sort of taught me not just about singing, but about life. And she was a great acting teacher as well. And from there, I literally packed my bags with no job and no place to live. And I moved to New York right after graduation.
That is like the New York story, right? Like that is, that's amazing.
Girl from Oklahoma, big city.
Well, I think ignorance is bliss. You know, you don't know enough.
Sure.
So you say, I can do that. But I really didn't. I mean, I didn't visit New York until I was 21. I was a junior in college. And I thought I was alive for the first time in my life. I stepped foot in the city and I thought, this is where I've either been here before or I was made to be here. I should also point out another Gamma Phi Beta. Kristen Chenoweth had been at OCU studying with Florence Birdwell before I was there. And right when I was there, her career started to take off. She was in a show called Steel Pierce. So we all heard about it back home. Mrs. Birdwell would talk about her. And I thought, if she can do it, maybe I can do it too. And then when I did move to New York, it was Kristen that got me an audition with her agency. And that started my career.
So look at the network. Like,
the networking is real.
That is so cool. Okay. I mean, I must imagine that you're in New York City. I bet there's a bunch of fresh-faced actors and it sounds like you had a really great network connection to kind of help get started a little bit. But yeah, what was that like? What were some of your first memories of auditioning? You know, what were some of the biggest challenges and when did you kind of start seeing the light of like, okay, yes, this is going somewhere?
Well, interestingly enough, it was during my senior year that I went for spring break and Kristen had set up this audition for me and a few others in Mrs. Birdwell's studio. And I did get this agency who said, we'll work with you. But then when I moved there, they said, well, go out on your own for a while. Let's see what you do. Like go audition at some of these smaller auditions. And if we see you're doing well, we'll get you some bigger auditions. So I did. And I remember moving there on a Thursday. And I got a little job working, you know, like one of those temp jobs, right? I was temp jobs on a Friday morning. And on Monday morning, I said, can I leave? I've got an audition. And I went to my first audition and it was a little non-union something. And I ended up getting that job because I think sometimes it's just right place, right time, you know?
Yeah.
And I did that and I thought, oh, things are really cooking. And then I realized I can't pay my rent on any of this. The job was so tiny, no money. The second job I got, so tiny, no money, you know? And so what I realized was you can be working in the field of your dreams and you still can't survive. And that's the big part of being an artist is that it's really hard to work in the business. And you know what I mean? It's like, even when you're working, it's not working.
You know, I talked to an actor who told me that like your job as an actor sometimes isn't, you know, being on the stage. That's like the good stuff. He's like, sometimes your job is just auditioning.
Yes. Well, it's just auditioning. But then the crazy part is, which I feel like we call ourselves professional auditioners, you know, constantly putting ourselves on tape, constantly going to open calls. But the other thing in our business is that you get the job, you actually land the part. And it's, you know, it kind of makes me feel how I feel about teachers. I feel like you are doing the most important work, you know, in our world, and you can't afford to pay your bills doing it. It's not right, you know? And so that first little while was pretty hard. And, I definitely was trying to do little things. I leaned on my parents a little bit at that time. I was one of those people who never wanted to have to do that. And I would come crawling with my tail between my legs. But thankfully I got a job. I got a national tour later on in that year, which helped me save some money and get back on my feet a little bit for a while. And then there were other years when that went back down again. So it's a little bit of a roller coaster until you can really get your feet into something better.
Yeah. I'm curious, what is it that, if there was like your support system, if there was some sort of like internal motivation, but what is it that sort of like kept you moving forward when in situations like the dip in the roller coaster where like it maybe doesn't feel like you can see when things are going to start rising up again? What was it that helped you move forward, even though it might not have seemed totally possible every single time?
I mean, Lex, that's the demoralizing part of our business. It is, it is not one where you leave college and you get a position with raised potential and you like move up and move up in the ladder. It just isn't like that. In fact, it can be quite the opposite. You can be on top of the world and the next day you can be down here. So it's the thing I know for sure is if you love it the way I love it, which is I eat, breathe, and sleep it, it's like, I can't not try. Right. So I will move mountains to try to make this happen. You know, I mean, if you somehow work it out to pay your bills, like you say, you have a day job while you're doing a little show way downtown, you know, at night, and you're fulfilling all your dreams. And then you get up and you go back, you're working your butt off until you can get a little bit of a nest egg if you're lucky. I think it's one of those things. And my teacher used to say, if there is anything in your life that you love just as much, anything, please do it. She said that to all of us. And we were in school for music, you know, to be performers. And she said, if there is anything right now, think about it. Please do it instead. Because even when you're working in our business, it can be one of the harder careers. It's emotionally hard, financially hard. And, you know, we're a dime a dozen, really. There's a lot of us out here. So I just knew that every time it seemed really hard, I just kept saying, but I can't be without it. So I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that is beautiful. I literally wrote down, like, I can't not try. I can't
not
that.
try. Yeah.
That's
I have
awesome.
to keep going. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially we have our basic human needs, right? We have to pay rent. We have to have good housing security, you know, to stay safe and healthy, to go to those auditions and whatnot. Yeah. It seems like there's a lot of challenges and interwoven there. But I am curious, you mentioned that you went on tour. What was that experience like? I just saw a musical that was on tour, and I was following some of the cast members and their journeys on Instagram and whatnot. And it seems intense. Yeah. So I'm curious, what was that like for you?
Well, you know, I remember it as being one of the best times of my life. I mean, I started my professional career. I did 2 summers at Music Theater of Wichita. And I remember just thinking, I found my peeps, you know. I just loved being around it. Summer stock is one of those things where you rehearse all day long and then you do a different show at night that you rehearsed last week. And then you go into doing that show and rehearsing the next show. So it's one of those things where you're just never stopping. And when I was on tour, we were doing a show, you know, for a week. We'd sit in a city, then we would travel to another, and we kept doing. And I just think of it as the best time. Look, I didn't have my kids. I wasn't married. I was trying to save some money. You can definitely do things very economically. I mean, you can room with 4 people and sleep on top of each other. So you pay $15 a piece. You know, it's like you really can save money. You can eat very smart, just whatever. Maybe we're eating ramen. I don't know. But you save the money you can because you're just being fed on the work. You know, it's all you care about is getting to perform and getting to do that thing you love. But it was fast and furious. And I think it always is. There's a part of me that sort of thrives in that constant juggle of, you know, running into the theater, slapping on my makeup, throwing on the costume, getting out there, like just feeling alive, running home, making kids lunches before I go to bed, waking up with them, getting them on the bus, you know, and you just sort of, some people go, how do you do it or whatever? That's the question, you know, how do you, I'm like, I don't think I'd want it to be any other way. I mean, you know, the saying is, I'll sleep when I'm dead, I suppose.
It sounds like a rush. I mean, it sounds like
there's
a lot of adrenaline.
You know, there's a rush to it. It's almost, I did this show last year, not to get off topic. I won't make this long, but this show was all about addiction, alcoholism. And I, in that moment, for the first time in my life, I really called my passion, my career, what it is. It's my addiction. And I believe it's a healthy one because I try to use it for good, but I really do have an addiction to this business in that I love the teamwork. I love, you know, expressing emotion and providing a space where people can feel and emote and be, you know, and have a shared experience, live theater. And it's something that I walk away and it just feeds me. You know, I'm fed.
Well, I'm curious. I kind of love that note about that's your addiction and that you saw that in the context of the play or musical that you were in. I'm curious a little bit about your craft on that note and a little bit more about the actual meat and bones of what you do. How do you go about choosing what characters you want to audition for? And then how do you go about finding that connection in your role?
Well, I mean, it's a good question. You feel differently all your life. You feel the things I want to play now are definitely not the things I wanted to play when I started, because even though as actors, we want to step outside who we are, you also do want to tackle the things that you're also holding inside. And so, the show that I just did, which was called Days of Wine and Roses, I asked for that show. I asked Adam Gettle to write it for me over 20 years ago.
Wow.
But the universe knew that wasn't the time for me to play this role. The time was now. And back then I was playing very different roles. I think it's a combination of what do I want to learn? Because that's what this is about. It's about learning. It's about evolving and being curious about what other types of humanity looks like. To me, that's what an acting job is. It's not a resource for going out and getting applause. For me, acting is the constant study of human beings, the constant study of human nature outside of myself. And so that I can understand better, I can, feel more deeply, I can empathize more fully with all different types of humanity. And so this particular piece was one that I wanted to go inside because I don't struggle with alcoholism. I feel grateful for that, but I know a lot of people who do, family members, and I wanted to try to understand that better. And so at that age, when I was 20, whatever I was, I think I wanted to go in there. I love to tell stories about love, being in love. Yeah. I did that for years as an ingenue. You see the things that appeal to you and you say, I want to tell that story, and then you see I turned down a lot of things, even though I should probably take the job for financial sake, of playing women who are sort of, I don't know, for a lack of better word, like I do turn away from playing a woman that I think I'm maybe sometimes seen as is like maybe a Karen for lack of better, sure. Like I turn down those roles because I don't want to perpetuate a problem. And that's not who I am. Now I could do it in the moment. I played Nellie Forbush. I think I played her, which seems very simple, but I did not take her simply because she is a woman who was raised at a very specific time. And I mean, we can call her, excuse my language, we can call her a bigot, but she was someone by the end of the show that was able to change, that had a change of heart, that was educated enough to change. And I thought that was a useful thing to play. But the first parts of the show were difficult for me to play. I mean, we play South Pacific and nobody really even knows what it's about, but we deeply know what it's about. And I thought long and hard about that, because I don't want to just keep perpetuating those problems, nor do I want anybody else to have to perpetuate stereotypes in what they play. But we make these decisions in order to educate, right? So in I'm going to talk about these revivals, but like in Carousel, nobody wants to play Julie because she's a victim of domestic abuse. However, domestic abuse happens every day in our world. So we have to tell the stories in order to educate.
Yeah. What I heard from the Nellie piece was like depth. It sounds like there was a depth, even though there is an element there of like some friction with the audience, or maybe the audience's values, the way that they view this character. There is still a depth that it sounds to me like you saw within Nellie that is sort of like, this is why she is the way that she is. This is sort of how we got to this point. And I think, not to speak for you, but the role of a Karen in some of these more contemporary pieces tends to feel pretty flat in my experience as a viewer. Like it doesn't view those types of women as like full, complex and complicated human beings, even amidst all of the complicated things they might do or say to other people. It sounds like Nellie had this depth that maybe attracted you.
It was very attractive to me in the fact that I want to believe, even now, I want to believe that, gosh, we can reach each other somehow. We can reach those people who've been carefully taught, really, that they can still, somewhere deep down in their soul, you can reach them. And just by exposure to other people and to education and to conversation and to love. And that's where, when you say flat, there are a lot of characters, but they've been written for centuries on the other side, where, and have been played incredibly by people who want to play things with more depth. Those flat characters have not served any of us. So, they've been made up by certain writers, right? They've been made up without the layers of knowledge. And so I did find that in that particular piece, she is used as a catalyst of how things could change, and so so going back to your question, that sort of core humanity in a person is what I really look for. I don't want to just play an Upper East Side, mother who's like, oh, I got to go with my Botox. I want to play people who maybe they start out that way, and then it's like, pow, something's in there that comes from something, and and what is it, and how can we get to it? And that's how I see this work.
Yeah.
I noticed you're in a lot of revival works as well. Things that might have been old movie musicals, or they were written, not as contemporary, or even Days of Wine and Roses, famous movie, Jack Lemmon. And now you're bringing it to life in this new way. What does that mean to you to be able to continue these stories that have been around for years and keep it refreshed and keeping audiences of today engaged with them?
Yeah, I've always been honored. I mean, I like to do both so deeply, because I like to create roles that have never lived. And then I like to take other ones and reimagine them for a today audience, So, I never went back on any of the revivals I've done. I've never gone back to the movie or the cast album or something to just copy, right? Because I really love. Listen, I mean, the best thing I could probably do is try to copy Julie Andrews, but
I think we all want to copy Julie Andrews.
But what's the point? Because that's already been done, right? So it's like, we're in a very different time. I'm a very different person. I carry a lot more a different life experience, and so one of the interesting things about doing that is to go back to the source material, try to understand where the writers were at the time and what they were trying to say, and then put it through my own lens. And I think that's where it kind of becomes the best kind of challenge. I'm going to have to do this differently than it's been done before. And, a good director will help you keep things that aren't broken, like let's keep that, because that's everybody wants that iconic thing. But now let's make her a whole different person that involves you, a piece of you comes through there. And so, yeah, I tell students, I always look for the nugget, I call it, which is, even if you went to play someone on a page that you had never even fathomed before, like Kirsten in Days of Wine and Roses, because I'm not a woman who struggles with an addiction, who would leave my child and my husband. It's hard for me to take that in. But there's a nugget of something that I can always identify. And then I build my whole show around that, like Anna and the King. And I've never been to modern day, Siam or to teach children, during the Civil War. I never but I can find the nugget. And for me, that was being a mother. And it changes everything. If you just literally find the nugget and build your whole show around it, it makes it very human.
You can also, like, now that you're saying this, I can sort of think of actors that I'm familiar with who, like, knowing what I know about them outside of the context of a movie or a show, like their characters sort of starts to make a little bit more sense in the context. And it might be that they're using that sort of personal connection to find that nugget. I think Colin Farrell in The Banshees of Inisherin feels very like deeply connected, right? Like a person who's struggled with addiction and alcoholism and then sort of connects there. So yeah, I totally see what you're talking about here, Kelli.
Yeah.
I'm curious, some actors have spoken about how difficult it can sometimes be to separate yourself from the character. Like it sounds like this nugget is sort of like where you and the character kind of like interlock in something that feels familiar. Are there characters that ever like stick with you beyond the stage? Do you feel like you take any of these characters home with you?
Well, right after I moved from Oklahoma and got my undergrad degree there, I moved up here and started going to Strasberg Institute acting school, and it's the method, and it's where you really like Daniel Day-Lewis is famous for using the method. Now, I think film acting it's a little easier to use the method, doing 8 shows a week of trying to be the person you're
sure. You have a life to live.
Yeah.
Well, actually, for everyone, can you quickly clarify what the method is for audiences that might not be familiar? Yeah,
it's based on Stanislavski. Lee Strasberg, his acting technique was called the method. And now this is, to paraphrase, it's really about going back into your own. Not only is it about going back into your own memory so deeply and using those tangible things, like you literally sit for 2 hours in a chair and go in there, and it's painful, and you take them and you use them, but it's also living inside the character fully as that person. So some of these film actors who are using it will leave their families. And someone said, actually, the method is a man's luxury because no woman could ever actually just leave her children to play a role for 6 months. And that is very true. And that's probably why I don't carry it with me. But you really do disappear into a full immersion of that life, right? Whether it's the way you're eating, the way you're speaking, how you dress, maybe you don't even look at the real world because it'll take you out of it. Well, I never had that luxury. So I sort of had to take the pieces that meant the most to me, like finding these core, which I call substitutions, like this is my core nugget, which actually could match a little bit of this nugget of this character, something like that. I can understand this character through this experience of my own. So those things are very useful, but I also think that, even though I bring myself to the role, Lex, you just said, if you know something about a person, an actor in public, you can maybe recognize something in them in the movie. And I've always thought one of the harder things of being an actor in these times, because of social media, is that we give too much of ourselves. I try to be really careful with that, because the minute you know too much about me in every way, the less you'll believe me. As Margaret Thatcher, that's why we can kind of forget Meryl Streep and go to Margaret Thatcher, whereas, I pick a person who's more of a celebrity rather than a craftsman. I won't name names, but there are lots of them, and they can't get away with disappearing into another human being, because they're so very much who they are.
It's all you see. You're like,
yes. And so therefore it's a different kind of performance, in my opinion. I tell students all the time, I say, choose celebrity or craft. There's a little bit, there's definitely craft with celebrity. You see it, but you'll find that a lot of those people aren't necessarily huge social media presences. You don't see Kate Blanchett much on social media. So it's just your choice. You can be a big star and you can be a big celebrity based on your lifestyle, maybe your fashion, maybe your political views and all that stuff. And that's your choice. And it's actually very, very impactful in the world, but it could affect how deeply you play sometimes. I'm not saying that there aren't exceptions to the rule. So please, nobody come after me.
Oh yeah. I mean,
there are definitely.
forever a part of sort of that celebrity system. I mean, when studios were a little bit more in charge of the persona per se of their actors and actresses, and how that evolves into your casting, it's been around forever, but now we're in this whole other level where you can take it on yourself entirely and put so much out there, or so little. So it is interesting how it's changed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, and I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I think you just have to, you choose for yourself. Like,
sure. It feels like you're pointing to something that we can objectively sort of observe, as opposed to like placing a judgment on someone's choice. Yeah.
Absolutely. Because at the same time, you can be a big celebrity with a huge personal, being out there personally, and it's helping you work a lot. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of success in it. It just depends on the type of work you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It sounds like, when you yourself are taking on a role, that is such a rich project in and of itself, just your relationship with yourself to your character. What is it like, crafting and curating the dynamic with your co-stars, creating that chemistry, creating that relationship dynamic on the screen? Because I think that is something that makes life so rich, right? Conflict, differences, coming together, drifting apart, the push and pull. Mm-hmm. What is that like with working with co-stars? Even, maybe co-stars that you don't necessarily get along with outside of work. We all have them. We're all human. And then there's some that we're best friends, and then we have to play enemies in a show. How do you go about transforming those relationships on stage or screen?
I mean, listen, it's all, I think, human nature makes it as challenging or as lovely because if we don't really get on with a person, but we can act like we do, we can still get the job done, but it's way more enjoyable when we love each other. I think that doing television is very different, because you can show up, meet someone for 5 minutes, and do a couple of scenes together. Whereas 8 shows a week, every day, same material, new audience, you bring in your own emotions from the day. You can fall on each other and be caught or be dropped, and it's so I think for when I learned, the bulk of my career has been doing theater and on Broadway. And I feel like I've learned more to really cherish the team, to really cherish my relationships. And I've been in situations where if it didn't feel great, I had to work to make it better, because I didn't want to work that way. I didn't want to work with any push and pull. Yeah. I wanted to work with full trust. And so what is it that we need to fix here? Like, how can we make this better? Because it feels like a family, and it feels like the kind of thing where I don't want to walk parallel with you, because I'm not going to make the art and the story that I want. So how can we make this better? Whereas, you go do a couple of days on a TV show, you can make it work. And we have.
Yeah. I mean, you've mentioned a couple different, we've talked about theater. We've talked a little bit about your television experience. And I also believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but you've also performed in operas, correct? Is that? Yeah. So you've sort of transitioned between, like, you have the stage theater performance, which is different than the television performance, which is different than the opera performance. I'm curious about how you approach these different mediums as a performer. Are there like unique challenges or rewards in the different sort of mediums you have to work in?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think for someone who's just really curious about the craft of performing, of art, performance art, I just didn't want to go through my life without just trying as many things as possible. Like, I'll see shows where I have no business out there being an acrobat, but I think I want to try it. You know what I mean? It's like, I want to, like, whatever someone's doing to like promote like a story in an artistic way, I'm like, oh, I just want to do that once, So, but I do think, and I have a colleague, Bart Shear, who's directed me a lot of things. We always say that our common denominator is we're truth seekers, right? We want to find something in a story that just feels really honest, so that it can feel human, right? And even if you're telling a ridiculous story, you've got to find, like, even the guy playing the villain has to find his truth in that. Like, what is that reality? And so I always say, truth can be in a whisper, in a yell, in voice like this. And if you think about it, television versus opera should really be no different as far as how you connect with what you're saying.
Yeah.
But the art forms are different. I mean, opera with 0 microphone in a 4,000 seat house is all front faced, the most presentational thing I've ever had to do, making it my least favorite. And although I love it, I mean, I've loved the opportunity. And musical theater is a combination of getting to sing, but also turning, because of microphones, turning and having these intimate acting moments with people. Whereas television without the singing is the most, sort of, I would say, normalized, kind of human discussion. And so they're all just at different levels of intensity. But they all mean a lot to me, and they have space, in my heart. But theater will always sort of be my home base.
Yeah.
So maybe we can see a Cirque du Soleil performance from you soon. Like, is that?
Yeah, I wouldn't count on it, but it doesn't mean I'm over there. I'm not over there pining,
So when I heard you say, like, yes, I would love to try that, I was wondering, are there any roles out there that you haven't played or haven't played yet that you would just love to, for whatever reason, and why? Would it be like the characters who they are? Would it be something that you can connect with story-wise? I'm curious, like, what your dream role would be and why, and what that would bring to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this has been something that I think about a lot, because people say, well, what do you want to do? What do you want to do next? And there isn't really something that's pre-existing for a woman that I feel like I haven't, that I want to do. I always say I'll know it when I see it, like a new thing. Like, however, there are some male roles that, because when those things, especially because things have already been written, that means they've been written a while back, right? So they had a man wrote them probably, not every time, but some of those things appeal to me because they were telling a story through the male writer's lens, but the intent, this core of the story is something I very, very much understand. Like Sunday in the Park with George. George is a character that Sondheim wrote so deeply about himself, which is the story of an artist's life, where you're so intent on doing the art that you can miss the whole world as it goes by in the window, right? You lose relationships. You don't take the time for family, and where I do in my life, I make a point to do that. I often sing like Finishing the Hat and things from that show as a reminder to always make sure that I'm not missing out on my life with my children and my husband. But I understand that feeling as an artist, that, like, if there was ever a version of Sunday in the Park with George where George was a Georgina, I would, it's like those things are interesting to me because we ladies have lived some of those experiences, but yes. I've told a lot of stories about, the female perspective as written by mostly men. And so it's very appealing to me to think about telling a story of a working mom and wife and woman who struggled with the balance.
I'm ready for Georgina. That sounds great.
Georgia, Georgette, whatever.
Yes.
Sure. We've got options.
Just George.
Just George. Yes.
Yeah. George is great. Yeah.
Hi, listeners. I'm Jessica Budjanowski, and welcome to our True Connection segment. It's your source for Gamma Phi Beta information, special stories of our sisterhood, and tools to get you involved. While listening to Kelli's journey, she talked about always learning and being curious about the world around us. It's clear that Gamma Phi Beta's values connected to her personal values of growth and development. Gamma Phi Beta is committed to positively contributing to our members' learning and development. And with that, we made learning one of our core values. As Kelli discussed, always learning and asking questions, it took me back to something my grandmother would say to me. She'd say, in order to be alive, you have to learn something new every single day. I feel like many Gamma Phis, including Kelli, live this same thought. We're constantly challenging ourselves to ask more, to engage in new ways, and to grow our own mindsets. And this helps us feel alive. Our sisterhood helps our members realize their full potential by offering forward-thinking programs, along with tools and opportunities to become constructive, engaged leaders and contributors to the greater community. Kelli has certainly led the way with the support of our sisterhood. Now, Gamma Phi Beta provides comprehensive member education to our collegians through Fidelity programming. Fidelity is a combination of online lessons and in-chapter programs that are intended to educate all members on life skills and sorority policies and procedures. We also have a real wellness program that covers topics designed to promote the physical, spiritual, and mental wellness of our members. Gamma Phi Beta created a learning culture, not just for when we're in college, but for every day afterwards. And our sisterhood supports an open mindset. It encourages an independent search for knowledge, but it also welcomes shared learning. And I can say confidently that Gamma Phi Beta has helped me have a growth mindset, and that's included embracing learning, working hard, welcoming challenges, taking feedback constructively, and learning to fail forward, and of course, bounce back. For more information about how we support learning for our sisterhood, visit gammaphibeta.org. I'm Jessica Budjanowski. Let's keep connected until next time.
I feel like I'm taking in a lot of your passion for this craft. Like I can see and feel your like passion and excitement for this whole performing arts, this whole craft, this whole piece of art. And yeah, I'm super in awe that you took some time to share some of these elements with us. I'm going to ask like a slightly more technical question, just because I'm a little curious. You mentioned the piece of like when you're doing Broadway, that's like 8 shows of the same show. You're like doing them repeatedly. I would also assume that in addition to the shows, you're like living a life outside of the shows. You're like taking care of kids. You're doing all the other things you have to do. With the pace and rigor of a Broadway show, how do you take care of yourself amidst all of this? I'm thinking of things like taking care of your voice. Like, how do you preserve that? But I'm also thinking about things like your sanity. Like, how do you preserve that in the midst of all of the hectic hustle and bustle of like living a life and then doing these shows?
Well, one of the things where I don't think I personally have the discipline to get things right all the time, which I try to forgive myself for this, but is that when I don't have the excuse to give myself time, I don't always do it. Right. And being in a show gives me the excuse. I go to the theater, I get there an hour at least early. I'm doing yoga, I'm doing some meditation, I'm doing some breathing. I'm eating better than I've ever eaten. I'm drinking more water. I don't drink alcohol. During 8 shows a week, it's like being an athlete, So in those months that I'm doing the show and I'm tired from the home work balance, I feel better than I've felt in months because I'm just giving myself what I need in order to do my job. And then, of course, the show closes and I'm like, let's go. It's just, and I'm actually in that place right now. So I'm like, because we went on vacation and I'm doing whatever I want. And I'm just taking, getting the kids started at school. And I haven't had my regimen. I haven't given myself my time for my regimen. And so I think that it's an interesting thing. It seems like it would be harder when I have more to do, but just personally, I give myself the excuse to really take good care of myself because it's my job, but when I'm not there, my job is to just be mom and take care of everybody. And so really what would be better for me is to put my damn oxygen mask on first and give myself, all and I try, it's true, I'm giving myself a little, I'm exaggerating, but, because I do take pretty good care of myself, but I definitely take really good care of myself when I'm in the middle of the game season,
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like the pressure and the you can't move when the Broadway show is going to happen, right? Like that is a set schedule. You don't have the ability to change that. And so when you're working with so many variables that are unmovable, it becomes almost easier to see the variables that you can change and like make those changes for yourself in that moment. So I totally resonate with that. That makes total sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, it feels like a racehorse, like on the track versus like you're in an open field now.
Sure.
Exactly. So I'm going to go over here and then do some, and maybe I'm just going to lay down under this tree.
Yeah.
So it's one of those, but I think our bodies, they do sort of what they need to do. You need a rest. I was going furious all last winter and spring, like really furious, fast pace. I closed Days of Wine and Roses and went right into the hours at the Met and then right into Tony season. And so by the end of it, I just sort of collapsed a little bit, but it's I also realized I think all of you, if you go on social media or whatever, and everyone has a diet or a workout or a regimen or a lifestyle that when you get here, everything's going to be solved. And I think the best thing I've realized is that my body and my psyche is more sane when I know that I'm here a lot with my health and then I do this. And that's only because then I'll do this again. And so in this moment, I need to forgive myself because I need the inspiration to get back onto the health, and then I'll have a rest. And then I'll get back on the wagon of exercising every day or whatever it is that makes me feel good, drinking more water, resting better. I think we as human beings don't get to the top of the mountain and plateau and like live the rest of our lives. Oh, now that I've discovered that, everything's better. You know,
checked it off. We're good forever.
I think if you're lucky, life is a roller coaster, of good and bad, so that you can learn from each of them.
Yeah. Well, I heard you mention Tony season. Speaking of the roller coaster highs, I can imagine that is just a pinnacle event to be nominated. And here we are with a winner. Can you bring us back to when you found out about some of your nominations and when you found out that you were a winner of a Tony Award?
Yeah, no, listen, this has been the Tony ride with all of these shows has been pretty remarkable. It feels like I look back and I feel like, well, how has all that time passed? But because I think that, and I'm really being honest about this, it's not hyperbole or whatever. I didn't really know about the Tonys. I sometimes feel cheated by that. Like I didn't know to watch them. Like kids all over the country can watch the Tonys and dream. And I just nobody in my family cared or knew about that. So I didn't even know what they were. And the first time I ever watched them, I was out of college and it was when Kristen won. Oh. And she won a Tony for Charlie Brown and thanked our teacher, Florence Birdwell. And I remember going, oh, this is amazing. You can get up there in front of everybody and thank your teachers and your parents, and I mean, I knew what the Oscars were and all that, but I just didn't get it. And so sort of the first time I ever even went to the Tonys, I was in a show that was Tony nominated, that kind of thing. So it happened really fast for me. And I still go to the Tonys like this. I still feel like these are my people. These are all look at them. Look at them. Yeah, these are all the people that are different and feel, I've come alive and I love going to them. I love watching all my friends up there. I pinch myself that they are my friends up there. I pinch myself if I get to go on the stage. I never really had I just still feel really, even after 8 times, I'm like, gosh, I hope I get a Tony nomination. I just think it's just fantastic. And I know where it can be the opposite for people who I've literally watched the most talented people in our business for a century never be recognized, like the most talented people. And I'll never know the rhyme or the reason. I know there are politics involved. And so I am very sensitive to that. I get that. But I'll try never to be jaded by anything like that because I see where I'm lucky and I will always be proud of it and honored, and then keep lifting up and honoring and praising the people that absolutely deserve to be there too, that are somehow, I don't know what the voters are thinking sometimes.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So exciting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm realizing that Emma and I are both movie fans. We both seem to be
Huge
fond
movie
of
fans.
musicals. So
Yes.
I also want to think of folks in our audience who are maybe not in the category that Emma and I are. Like maybe they don't really watch musicals. Maybe they're not big theater people. If someone was maybe theater curious, if they're musical curious, maybe they're hesitant, they might have preconceived notions about this art form. Is there any musical or play you think you'd recommend people start with to maybe ease themselves into like theater or musicals? I'm thinking of like movie musicals, if we want to speak to those, or if there are any productions that I know Oklahoma, I feel like every high school is legally required to put on Oklahoma. So there are some that sort of like recur very often in places. So yeah, anything you'd say to the theater curious people, what recommendations would you have for them?
Yeah. And this is good because I'm from, and I'm generalizing because there's a lot of, I learned to love theater in Oklahoma and there were a lot of people with me, especially once I went to college. But out where I live, it's still not sports are the name of the game and it's very forward that way. So I get this question. And so, I think of as if I'm talking to my family or my extended family or friends back home, where you say, listen, go see, if you had to go, some of these things are being filmed now. Some of these things are, so that you can, if I was a kid, I would have loved to have turned on Netflix and to see Shrek the musical, which I thought was beautifully shot by DreamWorks, starring Brian Darcy James and Sutton Foster. I thought it was adorable. Hamilton is always a winner because there's never going to be anything like it. But there are these other types of things that if you can get yourself to actually see live theater that might not get to be filmed or that are these intimate small musicals like Fun Home or Next to Normal, or I mean if you haven't seen musicals, I would not send you to sort of the big commercial things. My thing is, let's get inside where someone's taken a risk with an idea that doesn't seem that commercial. I know Days of Wine and Roses was not for everybody. It was very hard subject matter, but it was for some people for sure. Like it was necessary. But there are musicals that come out every year, and plays that sort of just get inside the human story in a way that you don't even know you're being, all of a sudden you've fallen inside it and you don't even know how. I'm trying to, in my mind right now, come up with some of that is such a good question that I just need to think about it for a second.
Sure. Please
take your time.
But the things I've always been, one of the first big things I ever did was Light in the Piazza, and everybody can understand love and the lack there of love, and maybe someone who feels different than other people and doesn't know if they're worthy of love and if they'll ever be able to find it. And when they do, will people trust that it will be okay and allow them to have it? And I think that musical is stunning for those reasons. Whether or not you can see it on PBS or something like that, but and the music is swelling and difficult until you take it in a few times, and then it's unbelievably, you can't turn away from it. So I think don't just go for the easy, 6. I think go for something that challenges your ear. Go for a Sondheim that says, like Into the Woods or something, where you can get into it because the story of the big bad wolf, the story of, the whatever, but that music and the lyrics teach you something,
Love it. That's such great advice. I feel like that's how I got into the musical world. I was so lucky. I got to see Wicked on Broadway, but I was obviously so familiar with Wizard of Oz and all of that. And like when it twists it on its head a little bit, and you're like, ooh, this is so exciting. This is invigorating and rich. Yeah, that's such a cool experience.
Yeah. And, I think one of the beautiful things about it that people don't always know, and this is where all the Rodgers and Hammerstein musicals, they were very political. That's what art was way back in the Greeks. It was talking about something of the time, but sort of putting it inside somewhere where people could access it, right? Wicked is an incredible political statement. And so I think that's what the longevity is. I really do. You can know these characters and think you know what it's about, but if you really know the underlying subject of being different and trying to eradicate those different people, that sort of storylines represents so much. South Pacific, we just talked about that, what that was about, The King and I, colonization. These things all had a purpose, but it was how you told them to see if people could actually listen, and that's still happening every day. That's why people make art. Suff's a good example. Now that's right on the nose, but that it needs to be told, story of the suffragettes. And, so, these are not just to go out and listen to music. They're there to tell a story too.
Yeah. Yeah. Even when we think about, like, we talked about the large ones, but The Sound of Music also, there's like, that is like
World War II. Yes.
Yeah,
you're right there.
Front and center.
What were they were escaping. And so these things all were built around the need to talk about something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Are there any books or shows or, material out there that you would love to see transformed into a musical? And if so, which ones?
That's a great idea. That's a great question. I think what we get away from, what the things we're bringing up are mostly revival, like older ones, because there was a much bigger likelihood that you'd take a certain subject matter and then create a whole new story around it, right? And make something, and people trusted it. Well, theater is a hard sell, it is in this country, and we really want to keep it alive. But now one of the ways to do that is say, oh, you all know Back to the Future. We're going to make a musical of Back to the Future.
Okay, I had a friend who just saw that and loved it.
People love it. People absolutely love it. But it's also the trusting of, well, I don't know what that's about. I'm not going to go buy a ticket to that. But I recognize, this movie has been made into a musical, right? So if there was something, it wouldn't necessarily be a book or a movie. I'd probably, if I had all the money in the world and the time, I'd probably want to talk about something, like I'd want to make a musical about a subject like, I just produced a documentary about Renee Elise Goldsberry, who is a friend and was Angelica in Hamilton and won the Tony, Angelica Schuyler. But she's a local friend of mine whose kids are exactly my kids' ages. But she went through most of her career trying to have children, having many miscarriages, finally adopting her second child. These are the stories that we never talk about, right? We don't know that while they're staging Hamilton and the dream is big and all these people are becoming stars, we don't know that Renee Elise Goldsberry is losing a baby. Nobody's telling those stories. So what I would say is something that I was really passionate about, whether it be, something about moms in this business or something, and then build a musical around it where we know moms. We don't know the book or the movie, but we know the story, and then we come in and we learn something new about it. But stuff like that, I want to be a part of stuff like that. Off the top of my head, I don't know right now what that subject would be, but I love it. And there probably is a wonderful book or something that would be a good source for all of those things.
That is so cool. I can see it. I can see it happening. I'll stay tuned.
And it feels like that goes back to what you were saying earlier about a lot of these like very pivotal, very well-known works tend to be written, directed, or like men are at the central focus of a lot of these stories. And women tend to be excluded or like not as focal. And so it sounds like this idea, this kernel would be a really cool way to like expand some of those opportunities for a woman-led, like a woman-focused storyline.
Yeah, it's changing. And then there are wonderful men who are involved in these things too, allowing for space. But things are changing. I mean, Suffs, which is on Broadway and won the best score, Shana Taub, who wrote the score and the music and the book and the lyrics. It's all women performed. In fact, they play the men too, which in history in Shakespeare plays, men played the women and the men, so it's all female performed, directed by a woman, and written by a woman. And then like the Mother play starring Jessica Lange and my friend Celia Keenan Bolger, directed, produced, starring women, so you're having some change, but you're also, when we're doing revivals, the point was we were dealing with these things that were largely male focused or written. Whereas that can start to then mesh into new things that are created for and by women or by men who want to tell in combination or collaboration with a woman's opinion and voice, creating new things.
For sure. Love it. Well, I know we're kind of nearing the end of our time here, and it has been such an exciting experience. I do have one last question, at least on my part, and it's kind of a bigger one. But what is the legacy that you would like to leave to the performing arts world?
Oh, wow. That's a big question.
It is a big one.
Yeah. I guess the legacy I want to leave is that I never saw the art form as something that could do something for me. I've always felt like a vessel to bring something to the art form, to the story. I felt that way from early on. I wanted to be what I needed to get these stories across. And so I want to be someone who's known for like a deep, deep love and true belief in the craft. That we need this craft, that arts and education matters, that kids need to learn these types of communications, to better express themselves. I just really believe in it. It's been my center. And that's, and hopefully someone who changed it a little bit here and there too, brought it forward a little bit.
Oh, that's stunning.
I love that. This is slightly related, but the movie Sing Sing with,
yes, I haven't seen it, but yeah,
it's about like the power of performing arts in a prison system. Like it makes me think very deeply of that, of like how we need more arts, more theater, more big conversations about these emotions in a way that people can process. So I love that you're really rooting for, arts and education and arts in some of these spaces. That's beautiful.
It's so valuable. I think it all the time. I'm like, man, I wish I had taken more acting classes, not even like necessarily become a professional, but to just maybe tune into a part of myself that I didn't know was there, to kind of bring that, like, I don't know, gutsy woman to my professional life, or, maybe a softer side here and there. It's so valuable to explore yourself.
Yeah. Well, have you ever turned on a piece of music and it allowed you to release or cry or laugh?
Totally.
That's art. Have you ever written down something, or even if it's a poem or just a letter, or it's all art. We just don't know it, but it's allowing us to feel beyond sort of our own limit.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
So.
Well, the last part of our time together, Kelli, is on these rapid fire questions. So it's sort of inspired by Inside the Actors Studio. Yeah. We have an actor here today. Yeah. That's perfect. So James Lipton in Inside the Actors Studio will repeat the same sort of questions to every person. And we're doing something very similar here. So we have a couple sort of rapid fire questions. There's no right or wrong answer. Just tell us whatever's on your heart. They're going to be fun and light. Don't worry. Okay. But yeah, just asking you some rapid fire questions. So I will go ahead and start us. Kelli, what Gamify value resonates most with you? Love, labor, learning, or loyalty?
Loyalty.
Oh, love beautiful. It. I think that's like a big one. I feel like a lot of Gamifies are tuning into that one. What is something that's brought you joy this week?
Just my kids starting school and being okay, just like really being excited and learning the ropes and feeling good.
Yeah, it's an exciting season. Back to school. Yeah. I don't know. Fresh start.
Yeah, you worry about it a little bit. My daughter just entered middle school for the first time, and she's okay. She's good.
Yay!
So far, yeah.
Kelli, what is something new that you've learned recently?
Oh gosh, I feel like I learn all the time. Something new that I've learned. Well, I've learned that you ladies are very nice, and it's nice to talk to you, and that we're Gamma Phi Beta sisters from back.
Oh, well, likewise.
I've learned of some new people that are very lovely people in this world.
Oh gosh, thank you.
That is very
Man,
kind.
I feel like, whew, spotlight's on us. So sweet. What is something you would tell your college self?
Oh,
A million things, right?
Yeah, totally.
A handbook.
Well, I don't want to have regret. So just to keep believing that the way you did, and to not doubt yourself so much at times, to just, everything leads to something else. So just keep believing in yourself,
Love it.
That's awesome. Kelli, can you tell us about the moment you chose Gamify? So sort of like when you said yes, what was your yes
This
moment
is
to Gamify?
my sorority.
Yeah. I moved here with 4 girls and 3 of us were Gamifies at OCU.
Funny.
And I was just on the phone with the 4th before you called. But I remember my freshman year. Yeah, there was just something about the group of women at that school. It was a smaller school. We didn't have houses, but we had like meeting spaces. But I remember just feeling like these girls feel, well, there were a lot of artistic, like dancers, there were a lot of girls like that. But I just remember thinking, this feels like where I belong. This feels more like family and represent the person who I want to be, and not necessarily, or maybe the person, that I am and want to be, as opposed to sort of like an illusion of somebody, or like whatever. It just felt, they felt more real to me.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. Yeah. I think that is like a really big aspect of the community that we don't always give credit for. I feel like my experience in Lex, I'm sure you could say the same. It brought so much out of me that I didn't even know existed until I was around those peers.
Yeah. And it's still a lot of those Gamify girls from college are still my friend, years and years and years later. So
Love to hear it. That's exciting.
Yeah.
And then what was one moment in Gamify that prepared you for where you are today?
I guess you go through, in college, you make these groups, right? You join something like Gamify Beta, and you're sort of, there's a loyalty, there's a team, there's an effort to work together as women. Yeah. And then have the younger classes come in, and you're teaching them about we're stronger together. And then the world spits you out into whatever profession you go into. And it's not groups of women. It's been largely groups of men, and there's one spot for the lady, or there's 2. And so the world makes you a little competitive. I find women in their early 20s sort of worried, get out of my way. I'm going to go, right. Mm-hmm. And then you get to my age, which is, getting on, and you go, no, we've always been stronger together. And, and we all have our own lane, and the more lanes, the wider the power. And so, I think I get back to how I felt in college, which was, we're stronger in a group, and we're not competing for the same spots, but we're actually making up a group of us. And the older I get, I think, how can I put together a whole show where it's written by, produced by, starring all the women? And I'm very moved by those types of, that type of teamwork, and that came from college.
Oh, snaps to that. Power.
Yeah, that like collaborative energy over competition in that way.
Well, yeah, think about it. In the sorority, we had our leaders were all, the president, the secretary, we were all women. We were a woman, society. And
we've been around for 150 years. It must be working.
Yeah. And we love I'm been with my husband for over 22 years. He's the most wonderful, and we have a great partnership. But, so I'm not saying that. I'm saying there are a lot of great partnerships you can make, women and men, but it is really fun to know that it can be just the ladies, running a business or something.
Yeah. Cool. Okay. One last question for you, Kelli. If you could nominate any person in the world for membership to Gamify Beta, who would it be? And there are no wrong answers. We've got someone nominated Nana. We've got Oprah. We've got a whole cool crew
Nana,
that have been
Oprah.
listed here. Yeah.
Our little class of newly nominated Gamifys is so fun.
Yeah. Oh, good. I'm going to nominate Jennifer Garner.
Oh,
wow. Yes.
Good one.
She's a lovely person on and off. It's just what you see, I think, is what you get, which is someone who's pretty authentically pretty great.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
She like is so authentically messy. And I mean that in a very kind way. Like I like,
she's relatable.
She's a person. It feels like she feels like a full person. I huge fan of that. +1 to Jennifer Garner. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Get Electra in here.
Come on in.
Well, thank you so much, Kelli, for your time and indulging us as two movie nerds, two musical lovers. This was terrific. We have like a short sign off we like to do, so we'll do that here, and then we'll wrap up our time together. So thanks so much for listening to the True and Constant podcast. I'm Lex Stewart,
and I'm Emma Oremus. Till next time, stay true to you. True and Constant is brought to you by Gamma Phi Beta Sorority. If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider giving a gift to the 150th by going to gammaphibeta.org/150/podcast. Special thanks to our co-hosts, Emma Oremus and Lex Stewart. Jessica Bujanowski for the True Connection segment. Our editor, John Haight, and executive producers, Megan Kruger and Shauna Wilson. Our theme music, Panko Breaded Pork Chops, written by Michael Thomas Gager, performed and produced by Mikey Gager. Thank you for listening.